When you hear the name Anguilla, what comes to mind? Probably pristine white sand, that impossible turquoise water, maybe some super exclusive resorts, right? It's the very definition of a Caribbean paradise. But what if I told you that this paradise wasn't just found, it was forged, not in peace and tranquility, but in defiance? That behind this serene picture lies an incredible story of neglect and a revolution so quiet and strange, it almost sounds made up.
So that's our big question today. How on earth did this tiny, overlooked island manage to chart its own course? How did it go from being a forgotten colonial outpost to a symbol of high-end independence? Well, the answer is a fascinating journey that really shows you what resilience is all about. You see, the image Anguilla shows the world today is one of total escape, of peace and quiet. But that calm you see on the surface, it's built on a foundation of struggle, hidden just beneath the sand. This peace wasn't just handed to them, it was fought for, tooth and nail. And that right there is the central paradox of Anguilla. It's a place of calm, luxuriousness today, but it was built on a really turbulent history and a fierce, stubborn spirit of self-reliance. The roots of this resilience go deep, and I mean that literally. They go right down into the rock the island is made of. See, unlike most of its neighbors, which are explosive and volcanic, Anguilla's unique geology set it on a completely different path from the very beginning. It shaped everything. So here's the key difference. It's what's called a karst landscape. While most Caribbean islands were born from fiery volcanoes, Anguilla is basically a big piece of limestone. And that one geological fact had huge consequences. No rich volcanic soil meant it was never going to be a sugar plantation powerhouse. Instead, its landscape of caves and sinkholes created a totally different kind of destiny. And this unique geology didn't just shape the land, it shaped the people who lived on it. It set the stage for a culture that was distinctly Anguillan long before any European ships ever showed up. The island's first human story was really a tale of two very different peoples. First, you had the peaceful Arawaks. They were skilled farmers, leaving behind pottery and villages. But then they were eventually displaced by the Caribs, who were these formidable seafarers and warriors. This clash was really the first major power shift in Anguilla's history, a theme that, as you'll see, would come up again and again. Now, this pattern of struggle and adaptation just kept going right into the colonial era, but for Anguilla, colonization wasn't about being some prized possession. It was mostly about being overlooked, and that neglect, ironically, would end up forging its greatest strength. So, British settlers sail over from nearby St. Kitts around the middle of the 1600s. And yeah, they set up a plantation economy, but because of that limestone geology we just talked about, it never became a sugar giant like Jamaica or Barbados. And this lack of major economic importance, it meant one thing above all else: neglect. And this neglect wasn't just an idea, it had real-world consequences. When rival powers like France came knocking, which they did multiple times, the Anguillians were pretty much on their own. And you know what? Time and time again, they fought off the invaders. Each successful defense built a stronger sense of who they were, a spirit of self-reliance that would absolutely define their future. After emancipation in 1834, the neglect only got worse. Anguilla was politically tied to St. Kitts, but the administrators over there basically abandoned them. Infrastructure crumbled, the economy just stalled, and for over 100 years, this deep, simmering frustration just kept building. And eventually, that frustration boiled over. What happened next wasn't just unlikely, it was a revolution that happened in a way that nobody, especially not the British Empire, could have ever predicted. May 30th, 1967. Remember this date, because this is the day everything changed. Anguilla was about to be forced into a new state totally dominated by St. Kitts, and the people just decided, enough. They were done being ignored, it was time to take control. And just check out how this so-called revolution went down. First, led by a man named Ronald Webster, they declared their independence. Simple enough. Then, and this is brilliant, they peacefully kicked out the police force from St. Kitts. No shots fired. This led to the almost comical British invasion, codenamed Operation Sheepskin, where heavily armed troops landed on the beaches and were met not with resistance, but with welcomes and friendly waves. The point was made. By 1971, Anguilla had won its separation. This victory was the massive turning point. After finally getting out from under the thumb of St. Kitts, Anguilla was free to build its own future on its own terms. And just look at the economic transformation that freedom unlocked. Before 1967, the economy was all about survival. A little farming, harvesting salt, and money being sent home from relatives who'd left. But afterward, with the power to make their own choices, Anguillians didn't just chase any kind of development. They made a smart, strategic plan to target low-volume, high-value tourism and stable financial services. It was a deliberate choice to build wealth without destroying the island's character.
And that is the legacy you see today. Anguilla is a self-governing British overseas territory. It purposefully chose quality over quantity for its economy to keep that unique tranquility. But maybe the most important thing is this powerful sense of national pride, forged in the fire of having to stand up for themselves and demand their own future.
So, the next time you see one of those perfect pictures of an Anguillian beach, remember the story that's hiding just beneath the surface. It's an incredible reminder that sometimes being forgotten can be the biggest advantage you have. It's a story of how a small island, pushed to the side, turned neglect into independence and turned a long, hard struggle into a quiet, unshakable strength. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? What other amazing things are being built right now in the places the rest of the world has forgotten?